Ingimundr, also known as Ingimund and Ingemund, was an 11th-century Norwegian delegate sent by Magnús Óláfsson, King of Norway, to take control of the Kingdom of the Isles. The kingdom had descended into utter chaos after the death of Gofraid Crobán, King of the Isles, in 1095, with kin-strife amongst the latter's descendants followed by Irish intervention into the region. Magnus's apparent response was to send Ingimundr to take charge. According to the medieval Chronicle of Mann, soon after Ingimund's arrival in the Isles, he and his followers were slain in Lewis by the leading Islesmen, whilst he was in the midst of securing the kingship. The following year, Magnús took matters into his own hands, and personally oversaw the conquest of the Isles himself. Background: anarchy in the Isles. In the 1070s, Gofraid Crobán secured the kingship of the Isles through his conquest of Man, and forcefully added Dublin to his realm in about 1091. Gofraid's downfall came in 1094, when he was driven out of Ireland by the Uibrean, and died the following year in the Hebrides. There is uncertainty concerning the political situation in the Isles in the last decade of the 11th century. What is known for sure is that, before the end of the century, Magnús Óláfsson, King of Norway, led a marauding fleet from Scandinavia into the Isles, seized control of the kingdom, and held on to power in the Irish Sea region until his death in 1103. According to the Chronicle of Mann, when Gofraid died in 1095, Lagman succeeded him as his eldest son, and went on to reign for 7 years. The numerical calculations and chronology of this source are suspect, and it is uncertain if Lagman's reign began before Magnus's arrival, during Magnus's overlordship, or even after Magnus's death. Despite the uncertainty surrounding the inception of his reign, the Chronicle reveals that Lagman faced continued opposition from within his own family, in the form of an ongoing rebellion by his brother, Harald. Although the Chronicle of Mann maintains that Lagman voluntarily vacated his throne, there is reason to suspect that he was forced from power. In about 1096, the Chronicle claims that the leading Islesmen sought assistance of Muirchertach Éabrion, King of Munster, and petitioned him to provide a regent from his own kin to govern the kingdom until Lagman's younger brother, Amlabe, was old enough to assume control. The Chronicle's account could be evidence that, by about 1096, Lagman faced a faction formed around Amlabe, and that, when this faction was unable to topple Lagman by itself, it approached Éabrion for assistance in placing Amlabe upon the throne. Whatever the case, the Chronicle reveals that Éabrion then installed Domnall mac Taidc upon the throne. The slaying of Domnall's brother, Amlabe, as recorded by the Annals of the Four Masters in 1096, suggests that Domnall and his immediate family faced significant opposition in the Isles, possibly in the form of Lagman's adherents. The Chronicle credits Domnall with an oppressive 3-year reign that ended when the leading Islesmen revolted against him, and drove him from the kingdom back to Ireland. Ingimund's arrival in the Isles. The extent of Domnall's rule in the kingdom is unknown, and it is questionable whether he had any real authority in the northern Hebrides, the islands furthest from Man. In about 1097, Magnús sent Ingimundr into the Isles to take possession of the kingdom. After installing himself in Lewis, the Chronicle reveals that Ingimundr was overthrown and killed whilst in the midst of securing the kingship, and when he had arrived in the island of Lewis, he sent messengers to all the chieftains of the islands, ordering them to assemble together, and appoint him the king. But meanwhile he with his associates abandoned himself to robbery and banqueting, violated the chastity of women and girls, and devoted his attention to the other pleasures and allurements of the flesh. And when this had been reported to the chieftains of the islands, when they had already assembled together to appoint him king, they were fired with excessive rage, and hastened towards him, and calling upon him by night, they burned down the house in which he was, and annihilated him and all his men, some with the sword, and some in the flames. Ingimund's rationale for seating himself upon an island on the edge of the kingdom may have been due to the fact that he was unable to gain any authority on Man itself. In fact, the Chronicle reveals that civil war erupted the following year, and the chronicler Orderic Vitalis indicates that Man was devastated to point of being a virtual desert by the time Magnus appeared on the scene. The warring itself may have been related to the aforesaid factional struggles between Gofraid's sons. The fact that the chronicle makes no mention of Domnall during this particular conflict may be evidence that he had lost control of Man by then. Within the year, the same source records the arrival of Magnus himself, which could suggest that it was Ingimund's slaying at the hands of the Islesmen that had incited Magnus to take matters into his own hands. There is little known of the inauguration of kings in the Isles. What is apparent, however, is the fact that the so-called chieftains of the Isles, or Principes Insularum, played a significant role in king-making. Although Gofraid had originally gained the kingship through conquest, the chronicle reveals that his later descendants relied upon legitimization from the chieftains. For example, the chronicle reveals that it was the noblemen of the Isles who had approached Muirkatach to intervene in the Isles following the aforesaid strife between Gofraid's sons, and it was all the chieftains of the Isles who drove Muirkatach's aforesaid delegate Domnall from the Isles not long afterwards. Furthermore, following Magnus's eventual death in 1103, the chronicle records that it was the chieftains of the Isles who sent for Gofraid's youngest son, the aforesaid Amlabe, to occupy the throne. Citations